Hey, welcome back to the Seven Figure Music School podcast. I'm Daniel. This is Nate, and we are back in the saddle. We have been dropping a few episodes over the summer, but as we go into fall here, we're getting back to a more consistent schedule since we're not traveling as much, not on break. Nate, you're on the island right now.
I
And
am still on the island, but no, we're banging out the apps.
exactly. And what better topic to talk about as we're kind of mid-fall rush than how to deal with flaky leads.
Mm.
This is a time of year where you are getting more lesson requests. We even did, at the beginning of August, we did a big webinar on how to maximize your results in the fall rush. If you didn't get a chance to see that, we'll have that in the show notes. Because you still have a month or so left, and you could take advantage of this time of year where parents are a little more open to enrolling. But with more leads comes a little bit more frustration in the sense of, like, wait, why did they fill out this form if I'm going to email them back and call them back and they're just not going to respond to me? Wait, why did they come in for a trial lesson and then just completely disappear? Wait, why did they have a consult with me, seem interested, and then just totally drop off the map? This is a massive frustration that school owners have. And to some degree, anyone who's in sales or anyone who is looking for leads. And so today I thought, as in response to an email we got from someone asking us about this, to me, there's really two major things that need to be talked about when it comes to, quote unquote, dealing with flaky leads. There is the big picture, and then there's the tactics. Like, big picture, why is it happening? And then are there tactics that we can use to minimize that from happening? And the way I see it is that if we optimize both, we'll have a better result. So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about, Nate. Any initial thoughts there before we get going, Nate? Even just commenting on what I said there just a second ago.
I'm just going to give a quick motivational statistic because we were in, I'm acting currently at Brooklyn Music Factory as director of marketing. So I'm always thinking, is my enrollment team getting enough leads to be able to hit our enrollment targets, right? And so I was like, I'm curious where we were this time last year, how many new students enrolled in each sort of week during this, as you put it, it's like, this is the rush and we still have time, right? We want to be very careful that we don't think, well, we're a few weeks or a couple weeks into school, now it's winding down, right? So what was fascinating to me was that I went back and I said, okay, let me look at the last week of August. Last week of August, Brooklyn Music Factory was at, let's see here, I'll literally read it right now. Last week of August, we were at right around 364 enrollments, okay? The last week of September, just to be clear here, we were at 400 and I think we hit 65, right? So that means we added like just shy of 100 students in about 5 weeks. And so that's just motivation for everybody listening to say, in a real short amount of time, if we can address our flaky leads, Daniel, and turn into great closers, you can radically shift the look and feel of your school in a 5-week sprint. So that's just what I'm going to open with. I was literally looking at it this morning, so I feel like it's useful as a little motivation for all of us.
It's interesting because you're already hinting at some of the things I'm going to say later in the pod episode today.
I might have been.
Yeah, but let's talk big picture first. The big picture. Because everybody chases tactics because they're easy. They're very straightforward. Do this, get this result. There's sort of a temptation to it. And there's nothing wrong with tactics. Some tactics work really, really well. The interesting thing, at least to me, the interesting thing about tactics is that if you get the big picture right, the tactics work even better. The tactics have a multiplier effect. And the big picture, which I've been hinting at for the last 5 minutes, ultimate tactic to me is flake prevention. If you have flaky leads, you want to prevent flakes. You don't want to go chasing people down. The best way to prevent flaking is to have them not flake to begin with. And what makes someone not flake? Okay? To me, this is the question. Because this is about offense. Preventing flakes, chasing people down, that's defense. To me, when you go on the offensive, you're doing something that prevents a problem at all.
Right,
You
before
don't
they
even
even
have the
arrive.
problem.
Yeah,
Right.
they don't show
Yeah.
up at your door.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the deal. There is a school owner that I was talking to last week where they were looking at their leads and they were noticing that they were only converting about 25%, which is pretty low. That's not great. And we were kind of going through and talking about how they might solve this problem. And I gave them a form, a much detailed form of the advice I'm going to give here. So what does it mean to go on the offensive? All right, I'm going to say a couple words here. Okay, this would be like the world's greatest. This would be the world's greatest advertising campaign. You would not have flakes if this were the advertising campaign. All right, 2 words. It would be a 2-word ad.
What do you
Free iPhone.
right?
How many people do you think would flake on that offer? You could even make it difficult, like you have to send in like a written letter for it, right? Or like a rebate or something, or they have to go stand in a line somewhere, like at 4
I did
o'clock in the
stand in a
morning.
line.
Like at 4 o'clock in the morning, on in a different country. I don't know. Like, so my point is this: they wouldn't flake on that because the value is obviously so high and the thing that's being advertised is so desirable that they're not going to flake. And the principle is this: if you're getting a lot of flakes, the perceived value is not high, and or you're making it difficult for them to cash in on that value. Now, that's why the tactics work. The tactics that we'll talk about later, that's why they work. The tactics just decrease the amount of friction it takes for them to get what they want. But they won't flake if they want it. And so really the best thing to do to prevent flakes is to increase the perceived value of what you're doing, of your band program, of your piano program, of your voice lessons, of your drum school. But increase the value, you decrease the flakes.
And you have a great word in here that's so important for us. Perceived value, because that's actually what we're doing at the outset.
Exactly.
Right? That it's key to understand that everything we're doing around marketing and around our sales, our funnel is about improving perception of what it is you're going to deliver on, what the promise is. Yeah, love it. Should I start offering free iPhones, Daniel, if you sign up?
If you sign up for school? Well, let's see how your balance sheet looks after a year of that, okay? Then we'll make a judgment. Okay, we'll do an episode a year from now to the day on how well BMF's doing giving away free iPhones. So let me not just jump into the tactics. Let's talk at least one concrete way that we can increase perceived value. It's probably the most important one by far. There's certainly a lot of different ways. Product value equals believable result. I'm going to say that again. Product value equals believable result. So that's 4 words. 5 if you count the equals. But in my mind, it was just a symbol.
Got
it. So product, that's your lessons. Value, that's how much the parent values it. Now, what will increase that value? The result. So this assumes that you know the result that parents want, because a lot of times when I look at the marketing that a music school owner has for their school, it's suspiciously absent of the things that parents value and suspiciously full of the things that the school owner values. And so the parent looks at that and it's just like, again, I've made this analogy before, but it's like Charlie Brown's teacher. Mwah, 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 mwah. You're talking, but they're not hearing anything of value, right? And then the final word, I'm saying them out of order, believable. This is the proof that you have that you can actually give that value. And that shows up in the words on your website, the words in your ads, the pictures, the social media, the video performances that you show on your website and your social media and your YouTube channel and your Instagram reels and all that sort of thing. So product value equals believable results. And if you make them believe it before they meet you, they probably won't flake.
Mm. Yeah, it's one of the for the longest time, our testimonials on our website, Daniel, were we would cherry pick the testimonials we'd want, we'd lay them out in a beautiful way, and it was all good. And just recently, we just did a website redesign actually that launched literally today, which is exciting.
Wow. Didn't even know this.
But we decided to include just a carousel of Google reviews. People have been doing it forever, right? But we decided we were just going to add that actually in there. And so what's interesting is that to your there's nothing more believable to a parent than another parent sharing what their experience has been, right? It's exactly what you said. Like you want to give parents something that they understand. Just use other parents' words to describe what you're going to deliver, right? And so, anyways, I know we're getting into tactics, but I just wanted to share that because that's new. We were always just putting testimonials and cherry picking words and using them in creative ways, but now we have so many Google reviews, and we're just throwing them up there because the parents are actually describing the result in many ways better than we can.
And I'm just going to name drop an episode that we did. I don't know how far back, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, but we had a whole episode where you talked about becoming the most reviewed school in New York City and Brooklyn, obviously. So we'll drop that in the show notes. I'm sure our assistants can find which episode that is. And that's a really good episode to listen to because then you could do similar. You could drop that carousel on your front page. And Nate, while you were talking, I muted myself and I went and checked out the new website redesign. I actually like it. I didn't know that you guys did that. Yeah. There's some good things I'm seeing. And I'm very critical of websites.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Well, more on that. Maybe we'll do an episode on a website redesign.
Yes. Ooh, I like it. Okay. Great. Let's write that down. All right. So product value equals believable result. Prevent flakes by increasing the perceived value from the beginning. I'm just going to tell one more story. And then we're going to go to the tactics and then we'll be done. So I became obsessed with this idea of this formula that I've been saying for the last 5 minutes about a decade ago. I redesigned my website at the time, and I was learning how to write copy well, and all these sorts of things. And it got to the point that I'll never forget this. It was his dad. I could clearly picture his face. His son was a like early high school, and they had just moved to the area. Anyway, they come in for a trial lesson. And I worked with the kid, and I'm just landing on thick. Me and this kid immediately hit it off because he wanted to play video game music, and then we started talking about different video games that we both had played, and like it's like, I mean, I was in my early 30s. I wasn't close to being a teen, but obviously this dad was maybe at the time. Well, he's probably the age I am now. The point is this, that the dad was just like looking at me and his son talking this foreign language, video game music, and I knew this, and the son was getting super excited, and I could just tell the dad had this look on his face like, oh, we found the right spot. So we get to the end, and we have not, my prices weren't on my website. I hadn't talked about them. He hadn't asked via email, and he said, and if you're watching the video version of this podcast on YouTube, like it might, you'll be able to see, but he got this look in his face where he was like squinting his eyes, and he had this, like his teeth were bared. Like, what's the damage? Like, how bad is this going to be? Like, he's like, what's the price? And I said the price, and immediately like his face totally relaxed. He was like, oh, I thought it was going to be a lot more than that. Oh, I thought it was going to be a lot more than that. Here's what that means. The value's really, really high, and nobody buys something if the price that you are quoting is higher than the value they have in their head. They won't buy. That's just what's happening.
Right.
And so if the value is greater than the price you're quoting, they will buy. It's almost a certainty, unless there's some kind of friction or logistical issue that prevents them from purchasing. then they're going to buy.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this is the fundamentals. This is what prevents flaking before it even happens. This is what gets people lining up at your door. This is what sells out a summer camp, right?
Yeah, you know what I like about that too? It's just an easy calculus. You're like, are you pricing below the perceived value? In which case, you're just, and I'm not, this isn't an argument for pushing your prices down.
I was
This is
getting
an
ready to call
argument,
that out.
yeah, this is an argument for getting much better at
the value.
the value in real terms, i.e., what are you actually doing in your school to provide that value, but then also in how you communicate it. And that's the perception part.
And there might be an episode here on how to increase that perceived value. Like I've given one here, but then there's actually tactics around increasing perceived value. That's not what we're going to cover in the tactics here in a minute. We're going to actually talk about flake prevention in the tactics. So step one isn't even an active tactic for chasing down flakes or preventing it or whatever, but it is a crucial thing that you should be doing. I was just talking to a number of school owners this past Friday, and I asked them a very simple question, and that correlates with point number one here, which I haven't said yet. And it was shocking to me, these schools that are like doing $50,000 a month, and they couldn't even answer basic questions around their metrics.
Yep.
Around their metrics. And so the very first thing you have to do is you have to get very, very clear in your metrics, because most of you, judging by the 1,000+ schools that I've worked with over the last decade, most of you don't know what your site conversion rate is. Most of you don't know what your trial conversion rate is, down to 28% versus 29%. Most of you aren't tracking the number of trials. Most of you aren't tracking the number of phone calls, form fills, landing page fills, Instagram messages, Facebook messages for your studio business page or studio Instagram page. You aren't writing it down. And so some of you, maybe you're more optimistic and sunny, maybe your disposition just naturally is more optimistic and sunny, like Nate's, and you are underestimating how bad things are. And then maybe some of you are like me, who are overly pessimistic, and what you call being realistic is actually just pessimism. And you're more like me, and you're overestimating how bad things are. And so you actually don't even have a clear view on what the true problem is. And you don't have a clear or true view of where in the funnel things might be breaking down, right? So the very first thing you have to do is have a metrics dashboard that's tracking. And we've done episodes on this. I've done so many videos on my YouTube channel, even separate from the podcast, on metrics and what metrics you should be tracking. Like I literally have videos from back 2017, 2018, before this podcast even existed, where I was talking about these metrics. And I still get people to,
it's not like there's radically new metrics we're supposed to track. There aren't. They've basically been the same regardless of whether you're selling music lessons or, shoes. It's like they're very simple and straightforward and clear. And yeah, you've shared a bunch on that. And just there's this book I've mentioned before, but I every time I'm up, Jessica and I are living, we live in Maine for a couple of months, and I have a few books here, and I reread one of them called, The Millions Within, and he just has this great point, and it's so basic and so simple, Daniel, which is, you can't actually know where you're supposed to go if you don't know where you are right now. It's just so simple. It's like, how are you supposed to chart a course to improving on flaky leads or improving on your enrollment goals when you actually aren't measuring where you currently are and have been? And that's the whole point of that metrics, tactic number one, is you got to be measuring, because otherwise you don't know where you're actually trying to go. And secondly, when you start measuring consistently, then you can actually start to see the trends in your sales funnel. You can start to see where you're having problems. What we don't want to be saying is just making gross statements like you just put so well. Either optimistic statements like I would tend to, or pessimist that you might tend to, that aren't based in reality.
Yeah. I will just tell everyone, if you want something more in depth on these metrics, go to growyourmusicstudio.com/grow. And there's a whole video on what I call the metrics of success, the 4 numbers you really need to pay attention to in your studio. I released this video
Nice.
in 2019. The content is evergreen. It is what I teach in all my marketing trainings. It's been out there in the public for a long, long time. A lot of people watch this video and still like aren't tracking. Okay, so that's
And
tactic
this is,
number 1.
can I make one other point about
Yeah.
metrics? Is that right now, Daniel and I are supporting a whole group of school owners in the Founders Forum. And one of the things that we've implemented in the second year of it is specifically this dashboard of metrics that everybody's showing up to every month, having filled it in. And it goes beyond, enrollment metrics like we're talking about sales funnel within school. It extends to your personal goals and how the school is, benefiting you and aligned with what you want out of life and everything. But really the practice of filling that sucker in every month, Daniel, it's the practice that's part of the value, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, just wanted to just share that too.
Yeah. Okay, number 2, find out why they're flaking, right? But boy, this is awfully hard to do if they're flaking. So, in other words, what I'm saying is if someone is disappearing, it's very difficult to ask them why they're disappearing. But I have gotten very, very persistent with following up with people, obviously to sign up for lessons. And every once in a while, someone will actually respond to me and not join. But I got in touch with them and they will tell me, why they're not joining. Or in the rare instances that I didn't convert a trial, I could kind of feel and tell that parent wasn't feeling it. They weren't feeling my studio. And so I went from trying to quote unquote close the sale to asking parents like specific questions and trying to figure out like, why aren't they feeling this? Like, why? Like, when I could just tell the parent was skeptical, and I was doing the same song and dance that closed like 99.9% of all the other trials that came in. What is up with this parent? Now schools do not enjoy the same conversion rate that private studios do. Just in general, schools don't close students like private studios do. So you need to be more sensitive. You need to be more empathetic, more attuned, more observant of the family that's in there. And if you can tell that they're going to flake, if they're just giving signs, if they don't feel, start asking questions then. Don't hide. Don't hide from, like, don't hope, like, like if you were to go to your business coach later and you've had a particularly bad month at closing your trials or closing your phone consults if you don't do a trial. And they were like, well, what do you think it was? Oh, well, they just seem so into it. And you're like, you're just lying to yourself about what happened. Or you don't, you're kind of boring in your trials. That the kid isn't smiling and beaming when they leave. And you're lying to yourself that, oh, well, they see the value. No, they don't. They're flaking. They don't see the value. You might be an incredible teacher, but like you actually are bad in your trials. You're like boring in your trials, or you are not very convincing, or you're hiding your light. You aren't communicating that value. So don't lie to yourself, Nate.
Well, and what do you stand to lose? You're already going to lose them as a customer.
Right.
Why not in that moment ask a question like, hey, you seem like you're on the fence. What would make this a hell yes for you?
Yeah, I've asked that question. Not so much in my trials, but more in the context of, Grow Your Music Studio or Piano Express. Like, I can just tell someone isn't feeling Piano Express. I mean, that's a stupid thing, but they're not feeling it. And and I'm just like,
anybody?
Yeah, how could anybody? And like, I'll ask, and sometimes the reasons are legitimate. Well, like, we would have to redesign our space. Like, we don't have a room that would fit this. And like, okay, I get it. Yeah, that makes sense. Like, that's major friction, and a lot of times it is things like that. Like, it's a logistical issue more than it is like something wrong with the curriculum, because there's literally nothing wrong with it. So like being real and being attuned is huge.
Yeah. And I just feel like this point that you're making is so valuable because we live in an unfounded fear as salespeople in our music school, right? There's no reason to be afraid of an open and transparent conversation with a potential customer, especially if you genuinely believe in the value of what you're providing, right? If you're not trying to sell them on something, you're actually have something of true value, they're just not perceiving it. So back to your opening comment, what you're trying to do is understand how all these different potential customers perceive differently, right? How do they perceive what you're doing differently? Because you'll basically come up with these your sort of your script will improve over time, right, Daniel? You'll start seeing like, oh, this is a resistance point that people have. I start to recognize it in certain types of, parents that are certain types of trial lessons. I'm going to have to make sure that I share this aspect of what we do for this family to better understand the value, so there's nothing to lose from it, because it's not like they're going to come knocking on your door again next week and be like, any chance I could get another trial? They're here right now. They're not coming back.
Yeah. Okay, next, actually, Nate, you kind of mentioned this already in what you said here before, because what you said was one way that you could do tactic number 3, which is what I call testing the close when you're in the trial lesson or consult. It's a stress test. And so if someone gives you a yes, just test that yes. And the way that you test that yes is just ask some questions of the parent. Don't be like so hopeful. Like, again, if you're bad, if you get a lot of flakes, from either like maybe like a phone conversation to getting people into an actual trial, or if you get a lot of flakes from the trial to the actual lesson, like they said yes, but then they don't show up to the lesson.
Right.
You could be tempted to like just hear their yes and then, like put your fingers in your ears, close your eyes and go la 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 la, like just pretending there's not a problem. You hear the yes, you're like, oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, you're so relieved you got a yes that you're like, okay, great, we'll see you next Monday.
Right. But the yes isn't the goal. Them showing up and paying is the goal. And so this really kind of bleeds into point 4. Or tactic number 4. So just ask some questions, draw it out, ask them if they have questions, ask them if they have any concerns, ask them if they have any fears. Because not only does this draw out any potential objections, you're actually building rapport. You're actually building a relationship with them. You're learning how they think. You're actually learning how to market your studio better. You're actually learning what to put in your landing page or in your ads that will draw even more people in. If you ask all these questions, you begin to build a psychological profile in your head of your ideal customer, and then that just lives there rent-free. And then when you do have to go write marketing later, you have this rich canvas from which to draw, to write words or to come up with concepts that will make people want to buy from you and stay in your studio for a long, long time. So test your close by asking questions, testing their commitment somewhat, asking if they, are concerned about anything, ask them if, what experience have you had with music before? Have you ever enrolled your child in lessons before? Do you have an older child that maybe was in lessons, but you withdrew because they didn't like it? Things of that nature. And again, the whole trial, and we've done podcast episodes on what an ideal trial is like, or an ideal consult, where, again, I just laid it on so thick. I just stacked value, stack. Just kept telling stories, kept just through the stories demonstrating how, instead of me just telling people loved it, the studio, instead of just telling people that people got good results, I told stories about it, which is massive. So 4 is get more commitment out of them at the trial or close, or trial or consult. So one of my long-term coaching clients, and he's taken every single course I have, he literally so his wife is the teacher. He essentially kind of runs the operations and marketing of the studio. So while the child is in the lesson room getting their trial lesson, he's actually sitting out in the waiting room with the parent and selling the parent on the lessons. He's very good at sales, and he has an iPad right there, and he fills out the registration form for them and literally takes their credit card and swipes the card while the child is still in the trial. And they don't have a flake problem.
No, they don't have a
That's
flake
like the,
problem.
yeah, go.
Well, I was going to say that reminds me too. There's some studios that we've worked with that almost have like sort of like commitment contracts with parents where they'll be like, hey, let's walk through all the things that we do that we're going to ask you to do as a family that ensure that you get the most value out of your lessons. So anyways,
and by the way, this commitment contract is a good example of building perceived value, because you might think of it as, oh, I'm trying to get the parent to agree to get the kid to practice more. Actually, the fact that you've even thought about your service, your school that much, and you're requiring, that's building massive value in their head. Like, it shows that you respect yourself, and it shows strong leadership, and that makes a strong impression on a buyer.
You know, we do another version of it's sort of like a side door commitment version, Daniel, where oftentimes when someone comes into Brooklyn Music Factory, we ensure that the parent is introduced to other parents in the community room.
Ooh.
And we also ensure that the student ends up meeting another student. But we're oftentimes picking students that are sort of like veterans that are on the 6 years into the journey. And when a parent says, hey, I have a question about X, I will actually deflect the question. I'll be like, why ask me? Why don't you ask, Kenta? He's been here for 9 years. He can answer. Kenta, how would you answer that question? And that is to your trust. When you start putting a student in the role of developing a relationship, building trust with the parent, showing, they're like, what? I want my child to be able to answer questions like this and, whatever. So it's it's another way to sort of actually show them how committed you are and how committed we are as a community to this sort of, the growth of the kids.
I might have to add a sixth tactic to this list. Have a sales force made of 9-year-olds.
Dude, I can't remember if we did an episode on tours. I think we did do an episode on how to give great tours of your school. But anyways, one of the tactics that we used that was just purely by accident was that we started recruiting actually our teens and our middle schoolers to give the tours. And we did it probably because we were understaffed, and we were just, hey, Dagger, you want to give a tour? And he was just hanging out.
Actually, we didn't do a whole episode on tours. It was part of our 2-part episode on open houses.
Oh, right. Nice.
Yeah. So I'll have one of the assistants find that and put it in the show notes. I think, in fact, I even think it was either point number 6 or 7. I think it was in the second episode. That's I've been doing this too long. Okay, the 5th tactic.
Fire.
And that is just to be more aggressive in every part of the funnel. Your website should just be loaded with value. There shouldn't be a single word on that website that doesn't sell your school. You should have plenty of contact forms and buttons to get to the contact form. You should be selling on that website. You should be persuasive. Anything that isn't persuasive should not be on there. Your degree, while important to you, is not important to the parent. It doesn't need to be on the website. You can put it if you want, but you could be distracting them from actually making a buying decision. So that's aggressiveness. Aggressive and follow-up. We've done whole entire episodes on this. We've even done episodes recently on this. I'm not going to belabor this point, but it's text, call, email, messages. I even went so far as to look people's names up and add them on Facebook. Or send postcards to their houses. I add them as friends, and they put me as friends, and I was posting about my studio on there all the time. And this is how I became very, very well known in my community, because I made a lot of friends, including people who never ended up signing up. But I would literally see them talking about me in Facebook groups. This happened. Someone who'd never set up my studio, someone would come into one of the local Facebook groups and say, hey, I'm looking for piano lessons. And people who never joined were saying my name and tagging me. But I'd have 8 people tagging my name on a thread in a local Facebook group. And so the purpose of being that aggressive with the emails, the texts, the follow-ups, the Facebook messages, that sort of thing, is to get them to actually respond to you. When they actually respond to you, you're trying to have a call with them and get them into the trial. And so then at that point in the funnel, what you want to do is make sure they get to the trial. Again, if the perceived value is high in that consult call or the email you send to them, more likely they're going to show up there. But there are things that you can do if you're having trouble getting people into trials, is maybe send them a reminder note the day before. If they're signing up on a calendar, maybe they get automated text reminding them of their time and the address location.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of these things add up. Its optimization increases the percentage across the funnel. So you've had your trial. Then what do? Well, hopefully you, as we were talking about, you got more commitment in that trial, as I said in Tactic 4. And so they're already committed because they've paid, as opposed to just saying words to you, right? But even then, let's say you're not trying to get them to pay right there. Okay, let's say that it's just maybe a little too aggressive for you. You're still giving them reminders so that they show up. They're getting the automated texts, that sort of thing. Maybe you give them a phone call. Maybe they get put on an email list. Maybe maybe you added them to social media. Maybe you had them while they're in the trial, like your Facebook page, so that now they're seeing ads for your studio because you're just running in audience ads, or they're seeing posts come up, or they're seeing stories come up because now they like your page. And then you get them into their first lesson, and now the internal marketing begins, which is like a whole different batch of things. But even then, you're still following up with those people and you're still building value. So that's kind of like that chain that it's that chain that we're trying to never break, so that the follow-ups are good.
Yeah, it's well put, because every single one of those are about developing that relationship and developing the relationship by increasing their awareness of what your school is, what your studio is, what it has to offer, what the benefit is of being part of that community. So even though it seems like a tactic, get them to like your Facebook page. It's not a tactic. Hopefully you're putting out really good content on Facebook. And so they're like, oh, I'm so grateful that we found this community. Can't wait to the lesson next Tuesday, right? Maybe can I close with one idea, Daniel, which is that, and I sort of said this in the example of the 5 touch point spreadsheet that we use at BMF for sales, but we really cannot ever fear the follow-up. We can't fear the customer or fear that there is any part of what we're doing that is dubious, right? Like, the point is that this is sort of what we opened with, is that you are providing something of very high value. And you're just trying to help people perceive the value at the level that you do, right? That's the key. That is the key. And if you think about it as trying to sell them on something, well, of course you're going to end up questioning your motives, right? Instead, just think about it as increasing the perceived value of these lessons. And this is why we talk all the time about, if you think you're selling piano lessons, you're going to be struggling for the duration of your career as a studio owner. You're actually selling something so much more valuable than a piano lesson. And so you need to help parents see all of that.